Hey everyone, happy Thursday to you all. We are on the day after, the hangover after the schedule release that came out on Wednesday evening. Everybody knows where they're going, who they're playing, when they're playing, including the Cincinnati Bengals, and we're going to talk about their whole slate of schedule, the ebbs and flows of the matchups that they have on their schedule, as well as the most intriguing matchups where we think they may end up. But that's always a fun game to play, I guess, at this time of year, even though it's way too early. At any rate, I'm Anthony Cosenza. He is John Sheeran. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. John, have you caught up on all the schedule work that has gone on over at A to Z Sports?
Caught up. I mean, I feel like we knew the Bengals schedule like on Monday at that point, like all the leaks coming in, which is just a yearly thing now. And I was a little disappointed, Anthony, because I think in years past, there's at least like a couple of leaks that end up not being true, but it seemed like all the leaks were 100% accurate this year. And it's like, damn, like the NFL is supposed to be this gatekeeping, colossal vessel of information. And apparently all of it was just leaked perfectly right before the schedule was released. So all the pre-writes were done ahead of time, and it was up with 100% accurate information. Oops. So whatever, NFL, do better next time.
Click publish. There you go. It's who probably hated the schedule leaks when he was a head coach was probably a guy like Bill Belichick. He's probably like just grouchy old guy, and such a guy that played things, I would say close to the vest, but close to the hoodie, I guess, is more apropos.
What's he up to nowadays?
No, God, let's not even go there. Good God, that's a minefield of a topic. This is the Orange and Black Insider, as mentioned, part of the Believe Podcast Network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, where you can get our show. You can get Talking Football with Bengal Jim and friends. Keep an eye out, by the way, on SB Nation and CincyJungle.com. They are going to be featuring some people who do extravagant tailgates, and Cincy Jungle has selected, of course, the maestro of Bengals tailgates, Mr. Jim Foster, to be highlighted, to be determined when that is, but should have some cool clips and a cool highlight there. So check that out, but get their show as well, Talking Football with Bengal Jim and friends, on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, as well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. So you can get all of those shows on one channel through your favorite audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon, all kinds of different stuff. Check it out. We are there. And of course, if you like the video side of things, you can get it on the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. We stream live there. And of course, the video will be there after the live stream. We stream live to a couple of different Twitter accounts at Bengals OBI, my own CJ Anthony CUI. So check that out. I keep calling it Twitter. It's X now, I guess, officially. So I should I should change that. And then of course, our YouTube channel, you can access that, the show icon underneath John's side of the screen on the bottom part. Click that show icon, click the subscribe button, the thumbs up. Check out all the different playlists we have. We've separated different episodes and mini episodes for you, whether it's player profiles, make or break players, interviews with current and former Bengals. Go check out some stuff, get your Bengals fix there how you can. And of course, you can get all of your Bengals news at CincyJungle.com and at A to Z Sports.com, where John Sheeran and his crew are doing a great job covering the Bengals. So no excuses. Play like a champion. Get your Bengals stuff at all those places. We're going to spend the bulk of the time here talking about the Bengals schedule. We'll pull that up in just a little bit, and we'll kind of walk through that. But John, it wouldn't be a show in the spring this year without bringing up old number 91 in the Cincinnati Bengals. And there is yet more drama coming from this entire situation. People are starting to take sides, whether it's siding with the player to get what he is worth or what he perceives he is worth. There are folks who are siding with the Bengals, saying he has a contract. They already extended him somewhat recently. He needs to honor that. Regardless, this got kind of uglier this week. It was, everyone initially was like, hey, Trey Hendrickson's coming to camp and that sort of thing. Well, he took about 20, 25 minutes talking with media on the sideline in street clothes. He was dressed pretty nice for street clothes, but he was in street clothes and was his polite, affable self, but also the frustration was palpable. And there was insinuations of poor communication, insinuations of I'm not going to play on this contract, and the stalemate continues, my friend.
I mean, street clothes. Those were country club clothes. You know, I've been around.
I was gonna say that's more like golf clothes, right? Yeah.
It's like that new age like polo, where it's like it's not actually like a collar. It's like somewhere in between like a shirt and like a polo. It's like a weird whatever.
I'm not really like the quarter zip thing or something. Yeah.
But aside from that, the whole thing stemmed from
style aside, fashion sense aside.
He was texted by head coach Zach Taylor in some way, shape, or form that if you don't show up to mandatory minicamp in a month's time, you are going to be fined, which is standard operating procedure for any player who is under contract by a team, right? It's mandatory minicamp. You have to show up or else there's repercussions to that. We don't know any more context about that conversation other than there was a text exchange. We don't know the entire context of the conversation, but that was what Hendrickson relayed to media members, and that's why he released a statement to ESPN earlier this week to Adam Schefter, who initially reported, saying that the communication between him and the front office since the NFL draft has been non-existent. We've kind of known for a while that the communication has really not been between him and the major players of the Bengals front office, where it's been kind of lower level members of there. So it's not necessarily Katie and Duke that have been kind of handling this. And that's mainly because it's spring and they don't see it as that big of a pressing issue, considering that there is no firm deadline with all of this. And that has continued to frustrate Hendrickson to the point where we're going public with this. And then I guess the whole point of Tuesday was to basically clear the air for almost 30 minutes about clearing up anything that has been said about the situation, said about him, clearing up misconceptions and all that stuff. And he really let it off by saying, like, I'm trying to showcase to my family, to my son, that this is how you handle adversity in any way, shape, or form. Speaking the truth will set you free, all that stuff. And I think he's very justified in doing all that. If it helps, get all this off of his chest, if it makes him feel better about the situation, that he's putting his actual voice and, personal first-person reflection on it, all that is well and good. I'm trying to find an original take here, Anthony, because I feel like I just people about the situation. This is still the Bengals, and whenever in any way, shape, or form you air out their dirty laundry with the way that they
don't like it.
Like, it doesn't matter if they are engaging in negotiations or if they're not. If you're talking about it and talking about the existent or non-existent communication, it doesn't necessarily make your situation better. And unless your name is Joe Burrow, it is really hard for your words in this way to actually make a dent and actually get them to move off of their position. It's very clear that they don't have the same sense of urgency about getting this done as he does. And we can all have vast, different opinions about that. I think we all, think how this situation should have been handled months ago, but regardless, it hasn't. And I understand why he felt he needed to do this. He's clearly very desperate to get something done, and his urgency is at a very high level, to the point where he's saying in May that he's not going to play out of this contract. But I just find it really hard to believe that he accomplished anything of significance in terms of getting an actual deal done with what he did earlier this week.
It's pushing a boulder uphill, right? I mean, it kind of is what it is when it comes to negotiations with the Cincinnati Bengals. And you can fault them for digging their heels in the sand and not giving any leeway to another side. But, I think unfortunately this situation is now clouding a few of the good things that they did this offseason, namely extending their wide receivers, bringing back Mike Gesicki and doing a few nice things this offseason. This now lingers over them. There are cases where there are a lot of cases where a Bengals player has gone public about their contract. They're displeased about it and airs out some dirty laundry with the team. And, I'm not going to play for him and all that sort of thing. And then they kind of get a contract close to, or maybe what they wanted. You can go back to Corey Dillon in the lean years, Carl Pickens, kind of a same kind of deal. And then they ended up playing because they got paid. But there are also a lot of other players where the Bengals just didn't really cave. And as we look back to the wide receivers, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, they had a specific, namely T, had a specific agent that was not making any headway with the Bengals in his negotiations. And then lo and behold, he jumps aboard with Jamar Chase's representation, and then things get going pretty quickly and both of them get done. I don't know much about Trey Hendrickson's agent. I know he negotiated an extension in the past with the Bengals, and I believe he was the representation who negotiated the first deal that he got in free agency with the Bengals. But I don't want to tell Trey what to do, but I mean, at some point, if that communication is not there with that specific representative, I don't know. I mean, you maybe look at right across the locker room and you see what happened with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and what their agent was able to achieve with the Bengals. And you go, well, I mean, it is just a different communicator needed for communication to happen. And I think Trey really has to ask himself, I mean, potentially it's the middleman in this that is not getting things going. Now I'm completely speculating there, but again, when you look at what happened with T. Higgins this offseason, it's like, well, we weren't dealing well with the past representation. We are dealing well with this current representation of Jamar Chase. And so T. Higgins made the wise decision to do that, and he got paid. I don't know if Trey Hendrickson's mind is there. He seems to be a pretty loyal guy and, a guy of conviction and all kinds of different positive traits. But, this communication word, and it was the same thing, if you remember, John, in the early days of the Higgins extension talks, communication's not there. Well, maybe you need to look at the lines of communication. Yes, the Bengals need to look in the mirror as well, but you maybe need to look at the lines of communication and say, what do we need to do here? I mean, is this just not the person to make this happen, or do we need a different approach and tactic altogether with the team?
I thought the same thing for sure. I think we all look back to the 1-year extension that his agent negotiated and agreed on his behalf, and it's like that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. In his mind at the time, it was another year of security for his family, which has been like the main thing that he's been kind of pounding the table as to why he's doing this. He wants long-term guarantees. He wants long-term stability. He likes playing for the Bengals. He likes living in Cincinnati. He wants to continue doing that, and he wants to make sure that he's appreciated and taken care of contractually in order to do that. Clearly, the way that his agent has operated over the past handful of years and how this has been an ongoing issue for like at least 3 years, ever since it's going all the way back to 2022. Apparently, like after the year that he signed the deal initially, he wasn't happy with the lack of guarantees in his contract. So this has been a constant battle for him, and I think that's why the Bengals just don't see this as a pressing issue to the point where they're just not really taking it as seriously as he wants it. They've just kind of seen this movie before, like even last year when he requested the trade. Like, it's like, okay, buddy, like you're under contract for 2 more years. We're not going to entertain this, especially after giving you an extension 9 months prior. Like, we can't even sign you to an extension until like later in the summer. Maybe that is what they promised to do and they didn't do. But whatever the case may be, they knew what they signed up for now twice. And it's like at some point, I'm totally with you. Like at some point, when you look in the mirror and say what I'm doing is not working, and clearly what others have tried to do in the past in terms of like speak up, it also doesn't work. And he made the point of saying like other players, like they're afraid to do this, and I'm trying to be an example of how you can do this and how you can speak your truth. But again, maybe that applies to other teams in other cities, but it doesn't apply here. I don't think they view Trey as a special exception to the rule. They just see him as another player that they have under contract is always going to come back to the table and say, well, I'm not just going to sit down and like not make any money, especially in the prime of my career. They know that this is his best chance to cash in. They know that coming off of a near defensive player of the year season at age 30, like he can't afford to wait around and risk playing this year without any new money attached to his name, or else his potential earnings are going to go down, and it's going to be really tough next year, even in free agency, to recuperate that value in case something does happen this year. They know all of that, and I think that's why they look at Trey and say, you can say anything you want. We just know how the story ends. It's probably going to end the same way it always does.
It's funny. We mentioned, hey, you should look across the locker room at T. Higgins and what he did with his representation, and maybe that is part of the answer. But, you could also say, well, you could look across the locker room at Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase banked on himself. It's a different situation, different points in their career, different contracts in which they were currently engaged when Chase didn't sign the extension, bet on himself last year. It's just a different set of circumstances between the two players. So for those people maybe saying, well, Trey should do the Chase thing, and then he'll get the big contract next year. The Bengals will pay more down the road, that sort of thing. I mean, maybe, but it's a different set of circumstances. It's players at different points in their career, different ages, that sort of thing. And hey, look, Trey's an outstanding player. I tend to be in the camp, this whole thing brings back the Andrew Whitworth discussion when the Bengals let him go and he went to the Rams and ended up arguably having as good, maybe even better part of his career with the Rams than he did with the Bengals. Obviously won the Super Bowl against them, that sort of thing. But I still think that Trey is kind of one of those age outliers just based on what we've seen at this point. If the Bengals are concerned about the age, which that should be a factor in all of this, I still think in my heart of hearts that Trey is one of those outliers like Whitworth was and still has a handful of good years left in the tank. But this just keeps getting uglier and uglier in this whole, and it wasn't, screw the Bengals. And he was polite. Again, he said, I'm what was it? Basically not beholden to the team, but I'm a soft spot for the team because they gave me that big contract, that big chance after being with the Saints, that sort of thing. And my career took the next level. But that commitment or that, compassion to the team kind of only goes so far. Money talks. And so money talks, and Trey did a lot of talking when he showed up this week. I mean, just where we stand right now, do you see in your crystal ball, do you see an extension happening? Do you see him ending up playing on this deal that he currently has? Do you see him playing elsewhere? I mean, where do you see this ending at this point?
I don't think anything has changed. And I think, full disclosure, like this whole thing could be solved if the Bengals just value Trey the way that he should be valued, the way that other teams clearly do value him. Like he was getting offers of saying like, hey, like we want to pay you, but we need to get you off the team first. And of course, we're not going to give away a first round pick for a player of your age. Sorry, there's a motorcycle.
No, that's all right.
But like, so that could all be solved if the Bengals just pay him probably what they should pay him. But whenever they get an ounce of like leverage, like, hey, like you're a bit on the older side, maybe you're about to decline a little bit. And because we have you under contract, we're gonna offer you less probably than what you're actually worth. If they just get past that, this whole thing can be by the wayside and everyone can be happy. But of course, they're not going to do that. And I feel sorry for Trey because of that. But it doesn't mean that he's handling this the correct way in terms of getting what he actually wants. So I still think that he's not going to play on his current deal, which means he's going to take the Bengals' best offer at the last possible minute, which means he's probably going to go into training camp. Maybe training camp is the deadline in terms of like getting this done, but we've seen training camp holdouts before with this team, especially in recent years. So I have no reason to believe that they're going to use July 20th or whatever the case may be to get this done. I think the deadline is going to be week 1, and maybe we see a signature on Friday or Saturday before they go up to Cleveland and play week 1. But I don't think I think Trey's right. He's not going to play on his current deal. I think he will take whatever the Bengals' best deal is because he knows he doesn't really have a choice.
Yeah, I think AJ Green signed an extension just a few days before the start of a season a few years back, if I'm not mistaken. KP from KC5 said they'd rather get nothing after his contract ends instead of paying him or trading him. They're dumb. It's the thing is, and I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, and we're going to move on to the schedule in just a second, but I think what we're dancing around from the team's perspective and not directly saying it, I guess we'll directly say it now, is this is also about the Bengals not wanting to set a precedent with players airing out their dirty laundry and then getting their way. That was a lot of the things that happened with their star players in the 90s. I mentioned a couple of them. You could go back to Lamar Parrish and his exit from the Bengals and all sorts of players that, they got dissatisfied, and it's like, well, we'll replace you. Now, that's fine to say in theory, but there are players that you need on your roster, and there are high performing players that are outliers to that rule, but you can go down the line, Carson Palmer, all kinds of different players, and you can side with whomever you want. There are reasonable arguments for each side, I think, but the fact of the matter is this is some of this, at least I think, is about the Bengals not wanting to set a precedent that the players rule the team. They are in charge. They set the tone of contract negotiations and that sort of thing. Yes, they will use market value. I know there's Daniel Hunter's contract out there, which may be comparable to what Trey may be looking for. But to me, a lot of this is old school Bengals mindset, which is not or continuing to set a precedent.
Yeah, you just stole the word. Like, I was going to close out. They're as old school as it gets. This is just who they are. It's who they've always been. Doesn't matter how much the league is going to evolve. This is who they will always be, and they'll probably get behind the times even more than they are now. But like, it's just us just reading into reality.
Yep, that is. But we will continue to keep you updated on this show, the Believe in Cincy podcast channel as a whole, cincyjungle.com, as well as A to Z Sports on all kinds of updates, should there be any in the near future, with Trey Hendrickson, his contract situation, and with the Cincinnati Bengals. As we're going to go to the schedule release now, but before we do, I want to kick this to the live comments and or people that maybe are watching after the fact and want to hit us up in the comments on the YouTube video and or on Twitter, that sort of thing. John and I, before we took the air, we kind of said, this year it felt a little different with the schedule release. It felt like there was maybe a little air taken out of the balloon there. That was this kind of another big event right after the draft, just to kind of keep the interest momentum going for the NFL. It kind of felt, I don't know, maybe he and I both have just done this for a while now, and it just felt a little bit, rinse and repeat, lather, rinse, repeat. But I'd love to get people's thoughts if they were as interested in the schedule release. We also feel that now, with social media being what it is, schedule leaks trickle through all the way. You kind of made that tongue-in-cheek remark when we opened the show, John, about, hey, we knew things on Monday. So I don't know, just I want to kick that out, just if people want to kick around conversation about their interest level in the schedule release this year. Obviously, interest level in the Bengals is still high with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, etc. But regardless, that being said, let's talk about the schedule, John, and I will pull up the Bengals image courtesy of the Bengals Twitter account, Bengals.com. Want to give credit where credit is due. And here is the schedule here as it stands right now. You have the 3 preseason games at Philadelphia. That should be a fun one, even though probably won't see many starters in that one. At Washington, another fun one. That is a Monday nighter in preseason game 2. Probably will see more starters in that based on Zach Taylor's comments, the slow starts, all of that. How much remains to be seen. And then, of course, Indianapolis, who my esteemed co-host here reminded me that they got in a little hot water with their schedule release stuff. But that is the preseason slate. Obviously, we're probably going to see the most in that Washington game. And then Indianapolis is probably going to be a lot of guys, I would assume. You probably get a little tune up from the starters, and then you probably see a lot of guys that are maybe grinding for roster spots, that sort of thing, as it usually goes with the end of the preseason. So let's start with what? Go ahead.
Just real quick. Is this like the 3rd preseason where they've played at Washington in like the last 5 years? I feel like this is like almost a tradition now.
Go back
not
and
a
look.
really good one.
Yeah, obviously, I mean,
I don't like playing that stadium.
I don't either. And I'm sure Joe Burrow's like, oh God, really? But I think, obviously in the preseason, they try and keep travel to a somewhat minimum. And when you look at, regionally, those are relatively close, especially Indy, which is always the last game of the preseason between these two teams. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. That stadium is just keep me away from that one. If you don't mind, John, maybe we start kind of go month by month.
Yeah.
And we'll just real quick to recap: at Cleveland week 1, home for Jacksonville, at Minnesota, at Denver, which is a Monday night football game. Then they host Detroit. They're at Green Bay. Then they host Pittsburgh. They host the Jets. They host Chicago. They got to bye pretty much right smack in the middle of the schedule. Then they are at Pittsburgh. They host New England. They are at Baltimore on Thanksgiving night. They are at Buffalo. They host Baltimore a couple of weeks later. They are at Miami, which is a Sunday night football game. And then they have Arizona and Cleveland to end the year. So let's, do you want to go month by month, or do we just want to talk about this thing as a whole? What's your preference?
Let's go month by month. Let's just keep it sectioned.
Okay. All right. So an interesting, potentially dangerous opening month for the Bengals, or one, depending on how you look at it, where they could really get off to a hot start. I'm very hesitant to say, hey, here we go, 4-0, that sort of thing. Cleveland, we don't really know who they are at this point. They've fallen off a cliff a little bit from the strong team that they were a couple of years ago. The big point here is who's going to be starting at quarterback for them. Last night, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Maurice Jones-Drew who said something to the effect of he's heard good things about Shedeur Sanders from Cleveland, despite his 5th round status. And he may be the starter, because they were talking about this game specifically. He may start in this game. Obviously, a lot of time needs to pass and a lot of things need to happen for that to take place. But they start and end the season with Cleveland going on the road to start the year, John, with a critical road division game against a team that they've been real up and down against.
That game could be against the Bad News Bears, and I would still expect Cincinnati to keep it close or lose. Like, it's week 1, man. Like, my eyes see better than, what's the phrase? My eyes see better than my.
I see better than I hear. Isn't that
I see better than I hear. I see better than I hear the hype about, fast starts to the thing in the past, man. I don't care who is at quarterback for Cleveland. The Bengals, not only, they've always played Cleveland close. They've gotten over their struggles against them in the last couple of times that they've played. But it's week 1, man. Like, I never know what this Bengals team looks like right out the gate. I don't know what they're going to do differently in terms of the preseason, in terms of the ramp up to this game, but I need to see it. I need to see it before I think that the Bengals are going to beat any team in week 1. I predicted that they'd lost to the Patriots this time last year, and of course that's what happened, right? Because they just weren't ready to play. They're never ready to play right out the gate, and of course it's such a giant emphasis. And the NFL gave them about the easiest game in terms of a realistic option to start the season, because typically you start against divisional teams or teams in the AFC, and they gave them the 2nd worst team in the NFL last year without a clear answer at quarterback. This has to be a win if they want to get things right, but I just don't know, and I'm not comfortable predicting it.
I am not comfortable predicting this one either. I am going to, I don't know if it's been posted quite yet. There is going to be a way too early season predictions post on Cincy Jungle that I'm putting out. So you'll want to check that out. We've got every game. We go through every game on that one. But yeah, tricky way to start the year. It could be something that makes you, feel good, get your season off right, get a division win. To me, again, you can say, week 1 doesn't really tell you much, and there's all these adages about things. But again, a road division game to start your season. I don't know if you want to say must win, but based on how they've started seasons, this has to be a highly, highly important game to them, and it has to be, they got to be ready to play, regardless of who they have at quarterback and all kinds of different things. So tricky game there. Then they come back home and they host the Jaguars. New coach. They're hoping that Liam Cohen can work some magic with Trevor Lawrence there. I still think Jacksonville may be a little bit, maybe a year or 2 away from being competitive again. Still should be fun with Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, but Lawrence still hasn't really taken that next step in his career. I personally feel pretty positive about this game, but again, nothing's guaranteed in the NFL, and stranger things have happened, but home opener, Jacksonville, and it's a team the Bengals have, handled somewhat well over the past couple of years.
For whatever reason, like there are some teams on the schedule where I feel like the Bengals benefit from playing them, or the Bengals would rather play them earlier in the season. I feel like the Jags, they're a team that can kind of catch you off guard early on because it's going to be obviously a time when Travis Hunter is extremely fresh and he's not going to be worn down by the toll of playing both sides for an entire season. It's only going to be week 2 by then, and we still don't know exactly how big of a workload he's going to have at both receiver and cornerback. But that's obviously going to be a phenomenal and fun matchup to watch when Jamar Chase goes up against him and when Hunter's on defense. And again, we don't know if that's going to be a full-time thing for him. Obviously, he's going to play a lot of receiver, but then that's Brian Thomas Jr., who people need to start paying attention to as one of the better young receivers in the NFL, and Hunter as his running mate with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback with an offense coordinator that they went out of their way to make the highest paid head coach outside of like maybe one other guy. Like they're trying to build something aggressively, and it may not look completely functional after the first couple of weeks, but I think this is a tougher game than maybe people may think just because of how bad Jacksonville was last year. They may be a weird team to kind of figure out in the early part of the season.
Yeah, it could go either way on that, right? Could be a team that you catch at the right time, and as they're kind of rebuilding and finding their identity under a new coach, maybe that things start to come together middle of the season, late season for the Jaguars, or again, maybe they catch fire early, but still a game that I think the Bengals should be favorites in that one, and we'll see what happens. But then they go, this is what rounds out the month that makes it pretty tough. You go to Minnesota, who have been the regular season champions over the past couple of years, and now they are pivoting to JJ McCarthy as their starting quarterback. I don't know, man. Just a good team, a well-coached team, but obviously in big games, they don't seem to show up against a lot of quality opponents. So that's what makes this one kind of a coin flip game for me. Could be a wild one. The last time these two faced off in the regular season was that wild home opener in 2021. So, interesting game. And it's going to be really for the Vikings to take that next step. It's going to be on their quarterback to see if he's got the stuff to be a long-time starter.
Yeah, this is a giant wild card for me because obviously no one expected the Vikings to be as good as they were, Sam Darnold. And I think just because of that, you can't discount how good or bad JJ McCarthy is going to be because Kevin O'Connell is just a phenomenal offensive head coach. And I think the reason why there's a little bit of confidence here is because defensive regression is very natural. It's very common around the NFL, and they were such a dominant defense, very turnover heavy Minnesota was last year. And Brian Flores is a phenomenal coordinator, but naturally it's hard to maintain that dominance year after year. And I think what Minnesota is going for them, they had a really good offseason. They bolstered the offensive line. They added Javon Hargrave, who may not be the player that he was, but he's still like a starting caliber defensive tackle. So it's still a really high quality roster playing at an underrated environment in terms of US Bank Stadium and the Vikings faithful. So that's, again, like there's none of these first 3 matchups, and we're going to get to the fourth one here really quickly. None of these 3 seem like an easy win, even if the Bengals are as good as we hope they are.
And I do retract my last statement. The Bengals did play Minnesota at the end of the 2023 season, the T. Higgins reach game.
Yeah.
And so, but that one was a wild finish along with the 2021 game. And speaking of wild finishes, they then go to Denver a week later. We know what happened at the game last year. That was a crazy one. And then a few years prior in Denver, the Khalid Kareem fumble recovery, and that one was kind of a stinker in terms of the scoreboard, but a close, wild game in its own right. And so the Bengals go to Denver. This to me is all about Bo Nix. It's all about Bo Nix showed a lot of good stuff last year, and there are some throws he made where I go, wow, there's the arm, wow. But there are also some decisions and a little bit of recklessness with the ball that you say, okay, maybe a little overconfident in that arm. And, he cost the Broncos last year. He made a lot of good plays. Obviously, the one that took it to overtime with 1 second on the clock or something like that, where he just kind of heaved one to Marvin Mims, I believe it was, who got it in the end zone. But at the end in overtime, he wasn't completing passes. He looked a little rattled. There were a couple of turnovers, that sort of thing. So to me, this is all on Bo Nix. And if the Bengals defense has shown improvement by this point, can they create a couple of turnovers? Can they play keep away a little bit from the stingy Denver defense? What's that matchup between Jamar Chase and Patrick Surtain going to look like? Very interesting game. It should be highly entertaining, but to me, it's all on Bo Nix and how he performs in this one.
I would agree with that. Just because of how well he played last year and how well he was playing towards the end of the season, and obviously didn't finish it too well against the Bills in the playoffs. But you have to figure that there's a lot for him to grow on, even if he's already like 25 years old or whatever the case may be. But that offense is still set up really well around him. This was the game last year that really solidified why the Bengals are better with T. Higgins than without, because when Surtain and Chase were battling, it was Riley Moss versus T. Higgins, and T. Higgins went off. But now, of course, the Broncos' biggest addition to the defense was drafting Zadie Barron in the first round, right? So that's a giant upgrade, I would say, over Riley Moss, and that's going to be a matchup to watch when he goes up against T. Higgins. Is that going to be the difference in terms of limiting the Bengals from scoring? Instead of scoring 30, they only scored 23. Like, I still think that the Broncos, their defense works against a lot of teams, but when you try to go man coverage against the Bengals, you typically lose more times than not because of the receiver talent and the connection that they have with Burrow. So I think this is still a defense that, despite how talented it is and despite how good the pass rush is, it's still a defense that the Bengals can put up points on, but playing in Denver is a completely different ballgame.
Yeah, keep an eye on Mike Gesicki in this one too.
Mm-hmm.
That he could be a key factor in that one. So after the first month, I've got them about 2-2, 3-1, depending on how things fall. I don't know if you've gone down that rabbit hole of predicting wins and losses. Yeah. I'm more inclined to go 2-2 just because of the slow starts this team has, but I do think, with a renewed focus, maybe even a slightly improved defense, 3-1 isn't out of reach. I don't think 4-0 is really, especially with 3 road games. I think that's pretty difficult. And the road games are all, they're not, rollover opponents really, or they shouldn't be. So that's kind of where I have them after the first month.
I had them at 2-2, and I feel like that's an acceptable result compared to the last 2 years when they were 1-3 and one. Yeah, they're 1-3 in both of those times. I need to see him win in week 1 before I predict it. Right? I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it until I see it. I think they can bounce back against Jacksonville as their home opener, and then they'll probably split between the Vikings and Broncos.
That's more or less where I have them, I think, as well. Then let's go to the month of October. We come to what is probably my favorite game on the entire schedule, just because of the entertainment value and 2 perennial underdog teams that have finally decided to turn the corner thanks to quarterback play, coaching, and all kinds of other factors. The Detroit Lions come to Cincinnati. I am highly tempted to make the trip out to Cincinnati to come to this game just because of the entertainment value and, of course, all of the lovely people in Cincinnati. But I am highly, highly interested in potentially coming to Cincinnati to attend this game. It is a later afternoon game and will probably be, I don't know if this one's on Fox or CBS just offhand, but I would assume this is going to be probably one of the ones that's on the majority of national TV at that afternoon spot. Just a fun game, tons of talent on both sides of the ball, particularly on offense for both teams. This one's going to be about the Bengals potentially staving off the Lions pass rush, Aiden Hutchinson coming back from injury, that sort of thing. I don't want to say win or lose, blah, 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 but I think regardless really of the result, I think this should be a hell of a football game.
It really should. I wonder if this is going to be a point of the season where the Lions start to figure it out with their new coaches. It's still going to be really early in the year, but losing both your coordinators does take a toll. Like, it doesn't matter how well you're set up. There is some of an adjustment period, and the Lions defense wasn't really that good to begin with last year, regardless of like some of the elite talent that they had. It was kind of like the Bengals, right? Where they had some really high quality pieces here and there, but the overall unit wasn't good enough to make a deep playoff run. But now they have a new defensive coordinator, and it's still, I think, a secondary that can be exploited. And the Bengals are obviously liable to drop 30 to 40 on you depending on the week. I think this really comes down to regardless of if Ben Johnson is there or not, they still have some dudes on offense that can just run by you. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs against this new look defense that's been desperate to add athletes. I think how the Bengals manage against him in their first time playing against him, one of the most electrifying players with the ball in his hands, like Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, like get ready, guys, because stopping Jahmyr Gibbs is pretty important.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit of a wild card key to this one, and I'm going to say it's the kicking game. The weather might be changing a little bit at this point, early October in Cincinnati. Detroit's used to playing, most of their games in domes, that sort of thing. Granted, they do play in the NFC North with a lot of outdoor venues that have tough kicking, climates, that sort of thing. But, I think the kicking game, and if Evan McPherson can get back to the old Evan McPherson that we remember, that may come down to it with all the points that could be scored in this one, but a fun game. Speaking of fun, the next one's pretty dang fun as well, at Green Bay. Another one I'm pretty tempted to try and get to if I'm able, on October 12th, another late afternoon game, 4:25 p.m. Eastern. I would assume this one's probably going to be on a lot of TVs nationally as well. Jordan Love, talented guy. Can he prove consistently to beat quality opponents in big games, that sort of thing? Green Bay is a tough team. So this one, the outlook is, I don't want to say grim for the Bengals, but this is going to be a tough matchup. But you want to talk about wacky ass games. The Bengals, I mean, good God, you go back to, what was it, 2005, the Brett Favre 5 interception game where the fan stormed the field and all that thing. 2009, the Daniel Coates, Lavernius Coles fumble.
Antoine Odom.
Ridiculous game. Then a few years later, you have the Terrence Newman, Reggie Nelson fumble recovery deal on 4th and 1 on, who was it? Not Jonathan Taylor. I can't remember his last name at the moment. He was a UCLA kid. Regardless. And then, of course, 21, right? We talk about kicking. Nobody wanted to kick the game winner in that one a handful of years ago. So this one, if you want to talk about wacky games between these two teams, it goes way back. And yes, it does even go back to starting Brett Favre's illustrious career as an NFL quarterback. So your thoughts on this one, John?
It seems like the Packers are always going to be decent. I feel like they're never going to have a bad roster, and it's always tough to play at Lambeau. I think the Bengals have a chance to be the better team on paper, but the history with this matchup is very wild, and it would not shock me if the Bengals lose a close one in a game where they probably should win. I personally think that the Bengals match up with the Lions pretty well. I could see them winning that game at home and then maybe coming back to have kind of a close loss where it's just one of those games on paper it makes more sense to predict a loss to the Lions and maybe beating the Packers, but we've seen these things kind of flip. And for the record, the Lions game is a 4:25 on Fox. That's probably gonna be the Brady, Kevin Burkhardt broadcasting crew, game of the week. And then this is also 4:25 on CBS. So I think there was a tweet out there. It's the Bengals are the main game in their time slot 8 times this year. So it counts more than just the night games on prime time. And these are 2 of their handful of games in the late afternoon slots where it's technically a prime time game because it's a national audience watching it.
Should be another fun one. I don't know. And we'll recap the month of October, and we're going a little long with this. We'll keep it moving along here. I don't know that I see them winning both the Detroit and Green Bay game. That's a tall ask there, back to back. Speaking of tall asks, the Bengals have 4 primetime games this year, and they got hosed, in my opinion. Number 1, they only have 1 primetime home game of the 4. Number 2 of them are on short weeks, 1 on a holiday. And this one right here, home for Pittsburgh, Thursday night football, short week after going through the gauntlet of at Minnesota, at Denver, home for Detroit, at Green Bay. Then you come back on a short week and host Pittsburgh. That to me is getting pretty hosed by the schedule makers. But you got to play who you play and where and when you play them. This is going to be a tough game, despite whatever's going on in Pittsburgh with Pickens gone and their quarterback situation and all kinds of different things. Kind of like Green Bay, regardless of the situation, they'll be scrappy, they'll be competitive, they'll be in it late in the season. To me, this is a pretty big hose job by the league and the schedule makers, but it is what it is.
The only saving grace here is that at least the home game is against a divisional opponent, which has been completely rare for the Bengals. And the fact that like the Ravens haven't played on the road in a primetime AFC North game in like 5 years or something like that. So they were supposed to play the Browns on Thursday Night Football last year. That game got flexed out because the Browns were terrible. So this is actually their chance to host in a divisional opponent in primetime, which the Bengals have had really good luck in playing the Steelers, I guess, under the lights at home. Like that was the Ryan Finley game. That was the Gio Bernard game all the way back in 2013. But history aside, like so much of my predictions were just based off like the previous game. And like, I feel like if they have a tough game against Green Bay, maybe they lose, they're kind of angry, they're trying to get back on track. We've seen these Thursday night games get really wacky in terms of like a high scoring affair where you don't expect it. And obviously the Steelers are obviously always stingy on defense, but I could see them like, I mean, they're capable of scoring against the Steelers defense. And I think it could be a situation where they're just trying to get like a bad taste out of their mouth after going through all those tough games previously. And it could be a scoring explosion here. I could see it.
Yeah, we could. That makes some sense. And then they close out the month hosting the New York Jets with a mini bye there. To me, that looks pretty promising for the Bengals. Yes, Justin Fields gave them fits the last time he faced them with the Chicago Bears, but I think a lot of things, you're at home 2 times in a row. You have the mini bye. The Jets, they've got some talent here and there, but I think the Bengals probably outweigh them roster-wise. So to me, that looks pretty promising. I mean, I think here, let's just say you split Green Bay and Detroit. That's 1-1. Pittsburgh, maybe you go 3-1 in this month. October does seem to be when the Bengals, at least for the most part, kind of find their footing. Again, I see 2-2, 2-2, 3-1 in this month.
Yeah, I'll give them 3-1. Like the Jets are obviously a game where it could just be like, you fall asleep and all of a sudden you're losing to the Jets, and we've seen that happen. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt after, let's hope that Mike White's not in this game. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. The Jets are obviously going through a transition. Aaron Glenn, I have confidence that he's going to be a good head coach. But again, that's another defense where they like to be really aggressive, play a lot of man, and that's a good matchup for the Bengals. So I'll see them winning. Maybe Marvin Jones comes back and scores 4 touchdowns again.
Okay, yeah. We've got anywhere from, let's just say 5 or 6 wins at this point, right? Is that what I've calculated through the first 8 weeks?
5-3, yeah.
Yeah, okay. If we average it out, let's call it that. We'll go a little light on November because week 10 is their bye week, but they do have 3 home games in a row with the Chicago Bears coming to town. I think this game's trickier than most people
100%.
see because I think, Caleb Williams getting more help this year, another year under his belt, that sort of thing. I think this is a trickier game than most people will give it credit for. I still think Bengals prevail just because they're at home again, but I think this is going to be one of those like, oh, how did this game get here? Oh, how did they, you know what I mean? Like, oh, how did Caleb Williams make that play? That sort of thing. I just sense this one being a frustrating one.
On paper, I kind of like the Bears, to be honest with you. And they're a wild card because, again, it's a new head coach and you don't know how good Caleb Williams is going to be. I just think by this point, Ben Johnson's offense is going to start clicking. That interior of the offensive line has been completely revamped. It looks like a pretty big mismatch, if I'm being honest, against the Bengals defensive line. I think the defense schematically plays a little bit off, and that sometimes gives the Bengals fits. I could see this being one of the games where the Bengals defense, even if they are better than last year, they may find themselves in trouble against an offense that does a lot of things that can counter what they'd like to do.
Yeah. I sense a frustrating one there for sure. We mentioned the bye. Then they go to Pittsburgh a couple of weeks after hosting them. Again, you don't see the Bengals sweep the Steelers very often in a season. And so that's why I'm inclined, whichever one you want to call there. I'm inclined to say they're 1-1 against Pittsburgh this year. But the Steelers at this point, this is when they start to surge in mid-November, December, that sort of thing. If they've stumbled at the beginning of the year, they are always in the picture towards the end. And more often than not, they get in the final dance, the playoff bracket. Even if they are one and done, it usually happens. So they're going to be tricky regardless of what you think of certain spots on their roster.
That's good justification because the Steelers, I think, are really upset about their own schedule because last year they played a lot of really tough teams at the end of the season and they managed to just squeak into the playoffs yet again. And I think the same is this year as well, at least based off of what their projected Vegas totals are. But yeah, at end of the season, it's tough to play Pittsburgh. It's tough to sweep them. The Bengals haven't swept a divisional opponent in a while, if I remember correctly. Maybe they did
2021.
Yeah, something like that. So I'll probably need to see it before I think it's going to happen. So if I think the Bengals are going to win in week 7, I'm probably going to think they're going to lose in week 11.
So then we start going to the end of November, right around Thanksgiving, and you have the New England Patriots coming to town, a game that many people feel that the Bengals should have won in week 1 last year, despite refereeing missed calls potentially and just poor defensive play and a lack of execution on offense. New England will be improved. Vrabel's there. Drake May has another, some more experience under his belt. So they will be improved. How much? I don't know. I still see this one as a promising one for the Bengals. I think New England's probably a year or two away.
Yes. Thank you, Kenyatta Johnson, for saying the Bengals swept the Browns last year. I did forget that. Browns were terrible, but so be it. I do think this game is going to be a lot different than last year. I could see this game being a shootout, to be honest with you. I really like how the idea of Drake May progressing with at least a better offensive line. I think Will Campbell's going to be a really good player immediately. It's not going to be like a great offense, but I could see this being one of those just crazy games where it's like a 44-31 type situation. The Bengals are obviously remembering what happened last year. The problem, Anthony, though, is that last year the Patriots were right in front of the Chiefs in the schedule, right? And everyone thought that was going to be a potential trap game, even if it was week 1, right? And that ended up being the case because they were a lot more locked in against the Chiefs. Of course, following this game, you have another Thursday night game
short
in Baltimore.
Week, road. Yeah, on the road, short week. Happy Thanksgiving, Cincinnati. They go to Baltimore, and man, this has to be one of the latest that they would have their first showdown against the Ravens in recent memory. But there it is, Thanksgiving night. We know these games have been wild themselves, particularly last year. Lamar Jackson has one loss in his career against the Bengals. They need to figure out how to beat him. And they just do not have answers. And this is where Al Golden's going to make his money in this game right here, or get the pitchforks and torches out, one of the two. But I don't like this game. Holiday, short week, road, all of that. You got another big game right after that as well. I just don't like this one.
I don't like it either. I wish I would have done some research about the record for teams playing on Thanksgiving night on the road. It feels like a pretty advantageous situation for the home team.
Yeah.
I guess the NFL just loves like the setup of Bengals traveling to Baltimore under the lights. It's happened 4 freaking years in a row, which somehow is like only half of the current record, which the Bears apparently played at Green Bay in under the lights like 9 of like 11 years while Aaron Rodgers was there, which is completely unfair, obviously, but that's how Aaron Rodgers became the owner of the Bears for a long period of time. I don't know why this is such an insistence upon the NFL schedule to always do this. It would be nice to play Baltimore just when the sun is out, where it's not, because that's a great atmosphere for a primetime game. But yeah, it doesn't really do the Bengals any favors here. I can't in good faith say this is a win for the Bengals.
Okay, so we had 5-3 through the October slate. Through November, there are 4 games despite the bye week. What did you say? They're like 2-2 at that point through this stretch of 4, or 1-3?
1-3, I think. I think I'm at 6-5. Whatever. I think no. So 6-6 after the Ravens game for me.
Okay. Yeah, because they've got Okay, so December. And this is where the Bengals start to hit the accelerator. They have a mini bye after that Baltimore game. They go to Buffalo. It is a late afternoon game. I think that one's locked in, and that will be a Fox game, I think, right? Or is that a CBS game? Yeah. And so that one's locked in there. I mean, I don't think it gets flexed. I don't think it can based on the network stuff. But I think if a lot of people had their way, this would probably be a primetime game as well. Look, the Bills took another step last year, but they kind of ran into the same thing with the Chiefs, and that, the story repeats itself. Lost in all of this, I think, outside of Bengal circles, is the fact that the Bengals have performed pretty well against Josh Allen and the Bills in recent years, and even the terrible Damar Hamlin game, the Bengals were kind of starting to assert control in that one as well. So I think it's going to be a good game. Just based on recent history, the Bengals have found ways to frustrate Josh Allen and the Bills, and maybe this is the game that Josh Allen again takes that next step, and he can start beating Burrow and Mahomes. But the track record is there. Yes, it's in Buffalo, but the Bengals have gone there in the playoffs and really just demolished them. So not saying that's going to happen this time around, but I do think the Bengals provide matchup problems in a variety of ways for the Bills.
I would agree. Like I like the Bengals in this one. I think the time of year, the quality of opponent, the stakes probably at play if you're hovering around 500 entering December, which is familiar territory for the Bengals at this point. This is when they typically lock in, and they shine really well against quality teams. Maybe not the Ravens necessarily, but against the Bills, they have a good history. And history aside, again, like I think that this is still a matchup where the Bengals can take it to the Bills defense unless they take a major step forward. I'm really interested, Anthony, in this stretch of games between Ravens, Bills, Ravens. This is when you need to see all the development really quickly for Shamar Stewart. They're going to need him so desperately against Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in this game, especially with the quality of the offensive line that the Bills have right now. Like Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins create such a wide pocket for Josh Allen to operate, disrupting that pocket and forcing him off his spot and making some rash decisions, which he is capable of doing from time to time. It's going to be so important to keep this game in a manageable way for the Bengals to just, muster together 24, 27 points for a victory.
Okay, and then they host Baltimore. The Lamar Jackson question: do you believe that the Bengals can sweep the Ravens this year, particularly at a critical? This isn't the struggling days of late September, early October. This is when the Bengals are usually playing their best football. Do you believe at home that the Bengals can finally slay that beast that is Lamar Jackson and get a win to split the series?
I think if there's going to be a time, it's going to be this one, but I'm going to be the stickler and say, show it to me first. Mm-hmm. Like it makes all the sense at home in what presumably could be a must-win situation. Everything is leading towards this. You want to just build off of the confidence of potentially beating Buffalo. It's a situation where the Bengals probably should win, but show it to me. Show me that you can beat Lamar Jackson in his own game.
Then they go to Miami for a Sunday Night Football, another road primetime game. Miami's an interesting team. We don't really know who they are. They surprise and explode with a lot of points. There's questions about Tua. Just a enigmatic team. I think on paper, again, Bengals usually playing good ball at this time of year. This seems like a game they should win, but it could be, another score fest. I tend to think the Bengals take this one, but I don't say that without, thinking about it quite a bit. Road, again, you're coming off of 2 huge games at Buffalo. Well, 3 actually, at Baltimore, at Buffalo, back to Baltimore, and then you have a Sunday night at Miami. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that or not.
No, this is one of the games I feel the most confident about, which is ridiculous to say because it's in late December and you have no idea and we don't know idea about any of these games, right? But especially week 16, the Bengals play well on Sunday Night Football, which is far from what it used to be back in the day. I'm not really impressed with the Dolphins necessarily, and typically around the end of the season is when they start to fall apart. You don't have the disadvantage of standing in 100-degree weather on the sideline because of how that stadium is oriented with the sun. So it's even if this game gets flexed to 4 in the afternoon, if the Dolphins aren't very good or if the Bengals aren't very good, there's not going to be that disadvantage. You're still going to be playing 70-degree weather when it's late December Miami. I like the Bengals in this one.
Yeah. Tricky game here. The Cardinals come to town right after Christmas. Last time the Bengals played the Cardinals, there was no Kyler Murray, and James Conner left the game early, and he was gashing the Bengals in that game, left the game early, did not return. And then Bengals started to kind of turn it on and ran away with it a bit in the desert. Now, assuming that Kyler Murray is healthy, he could bring a lot of problems similar to, probably, not to the same degree, but similar to Lamar Jackson in a lot of different respects. I don't know. This should be a game the Bengals win, but this could easily be one that Cardinals sneak out of with a win.
I can see that. I could definitely see a lot of points in this one. Like it's just that time of year for the Bengals. Like they're completely locked in. This is when their offense is clicking at the most. I don't think the Cardinals have a defense necessarily set up to limit the Bengals under 30 points. But yeah, the Cardinals could put together 30 points on their own with a special Kyler Murray game. I'll also just, I'll say that for right after we talk about the remaining games. But yeah, like I see the Bengals scoring a lot in this game, and with the season on potential on the line, I see them winning.
Okay, and then to wrap it up, they've got Cleveland at home in week 18. I think you and I both are kind of tenuous on week 1 and maybe lean towards a potential loss for the Bengals in Cleveland. And so for that reason, this could also be a weird deal where both, whatever teams are resting guys, or, if the seasons have gone down the drain for one or the other team, they're giving another guy a shot at quarterback, or, I don't know, different stuff. But I think the Bengals should handle this if we believe that they are playing good football. Their stars are healthy in December. I think this should be a win for the Bengals to wrap the season.
If they played the Patriots in week 18 last year while playing them in week 1, I think it would be the same situation as what could unfold this year, where the Patriots surprised the Bengals. I can see the Browns surprising the Bengals because it's just week 1 and they're just terrible in it. If they lose 2 games to these Browns, who are probably not going to win more than 5 or 6 games this year, something incredibly went wrong. I can't imagine the Bengals losing this unless injuries just completely dominated the season.
So I hover around 10-ish wins for the Bengals, maybe capping at 11, maybe as bad as another 9-8. Is that around where you have them?
When I did the schedule predictions, I was initially at 9-8, but then they moved it to 10-7. I could see 11 if they managed to win once against Baltimore, but I thought 10 was a relatively optimistic projection, but some people weren't necessarily happy with it. But Vegas has them at 9.5, and it's still like there's a couple stretches here where it's not easy, right? But we've seen this Bengals team and the trends that they typically deploy throughout the year, throughout the calendar. When November and December come around, regardless of the quality opponent, they typically show up, which is why I had them at 6-6 at some point. Finishing with that 10-7 probably gets them in the playoffs, which is obviously not like it has been in the past couple of years.
That was my next question. My next question is if you think that gets them in at 10 wins. I think you have, if you're 10-7, I think you're not super safe. Obviously there's, different tiebreakers and things like that. But I mean, I think double-digit wins, you should be in that mix to get in. Unfortunately, you'd be playing on the road quite a bit, that sort of thing. But that is the Bengals schedule. Let me see if I've been paying attention to the schedule and different things. So let me see if
you're looking for questions. I think Anthony might. Yep. Anthony froze out a little bit. We'll get back to him. But what I wanted to say while talking about the Cardinals game, Anthony, was there's obviously a disadvantage here with the primetime schedule layout and the fact that there's only one home game and it's a Thursday night, which for starters, really unfair for the Bengals for what they want to do in these primetime games. I don't know if they're going to try to fit, Ring of Honor and Strive the Jungle all into one just Thursday night, while still wanting to have a white Bengal type of game. That really sucks in terms of planning this. But I do think that the way that the schedule ends, they had 2 primetime games flexed into primetime. Unfortunately, they were both on the road last year, but 3 of their final 4 games are at home this year. And depending on how, surprising the Cardinals could be, depending on how important that Ravens game is in week 15, I wouldn't be shocked if they do get another primetime home game. Like they can flex basically any game like after week 8, as long as it's not protected by a network on like a late afternoon kickoff. It wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals are obviously in contention for the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those games was flexed to like Sunday Night Football, and that gives the Bengals, like, it would give the Bengals at least 2 primetime games. And of course they deserve that, right? Like, it's such a phenomenal atmosphere in Paycor. The fans always show up. That they deserve at least 2 of these opportunities every year, and not just one in the middle of October on a Thursday night.
Yeah, apologize. This wasn't my fault. StreamYard booted me. So StreamYard, shame on you. A couple of little comments here before we get going. Alex Murdoch says, Anthony, you always say you're going to come out, but rarely do we see you. I know. Hey, it isn't the easiest, John. I'm going to try and get my butt out there. I promise. We did have a super chat. I wanted to get to that. It was kind of a little bit about Trey Hendrickson. I'm going to see if I can pull those up. Oh, we had a couple. I like this one from Fuzzy Balls. Since 1990, teams that start 3-1 make the playoffs 78% of the time. This team should start 3-1 or 4-0. It's going to be a tough task, and it's going to take them, John, flipping the script from who they've been over the past few years. That is for sure. Thank you for the super chat, Fuzzy Balls. And Wayne Downey writes, the Bengals act like they give out rings for winning negotiations. This is going back to the Trey Hendrickson thing. We kind of got into the schedule chat before we got to this one, and having the fewest amount of dead money against the cap. LOL. I don't know if you have other comments on that, but again, we talked about the precedent thing, John.
Well, what's a ring to green in the money? Green in the spreadsheet, what's a ring to that?
A money clip, right? Or something like that. Isn't that? Yeah. There you go. Or safety
assets over liabilities.
Yeah, exactly. I do, and our good buddy Mike Holbrook says at least a bye in week 10. I think the bye comes in an opportune time, particularly with that gauntlet of Detroit, Green Bay, that sort of thing. So I think that does come at an opportune time. And at this point, what I was saying before StreamYard kicked me off, they 10-7 should get you in the dance. Unfortunately, you're probably looking at a lot of road games at that point, not something the Bengals aren't used to when in the playoffs. They have to, again, be that team. Should they perform pretty well in December, ride that momentum into the postseason and continue that going forward. Again, it's going to take, I think, a bounce back year from Evan McPherson. I think he's healed up from the issue last year. What was it? A groin issue. And so I think he's a key into this. Obviously the defense performing at least to something that is capable is a big key. And then of course, health of your stars is a big factor, of course, with the Bengals.
And I guess I don't really think of it this way, but of course, I'm not actually playing these games. The players sometimes think of this as if you have 2 Thursday night games, that's like 2 mini buys throughout the season, right? So you have a mini buy right before week 8 after you play the Steelers in week 7. You have a mini buy right before the Buffalo Bills, which is basically like the lead up to the final stretch of the season. So I obviously am not a fan of Thursday night games for players, but that's just how they look on the bright side of it. So I think the buys, the 2 mini buys and the actual buy are spread out pretty well in that regard. And obviously playing more games at home is better than playing more games on the road. And if you look at a 16-game schedule after you just play on the road in week 1, 9 home games compared to 7 road games, again, like regardless of some of the quality of opponents that are kind of stretched back to back, I think it's still a relatively favorable schedule compared to some teams who have a lot more daunting tasks on the road.
Agreed. Let's drop the mic and get on out of here. We've been going close to an hour and 10, talking a lot about the schedule, some Trey Hendrickson. I'm just going to ask this, John, where are you going to be at your Thanksgiving dinner, either venue or otherwise, like stage of the meal? Where are you done by the time the Bengals kick off at that point? Where are you at in the Thanksgiving night when the Bengals kick off at 8:20 Eastern?
I will explain this as my mic drop, because now that there's like 3 games every year on Christmas, I fear of the Bengals getting on one of those games, because I just don't want to work on Christmas Day. And unfortunately, it's going to happen at some point, but I want to push it off as long as I can. Of all the times that they could have a holiday game, Thanksgiving at 8 Eastern is like the best time for me personally, because we have family Thanksgiving around like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So we get there around the end of the the Lions game, and then we watch most of the Cowboys game. We eat. By the time it's like 7 o'clock, we're having the Midwestern goodbye, which takes an hour or whatever, but we're out the door by 8, right? So I think it's gonna work out great. It's gonna spend a lot of time with family, and then it's a night game, so there's not a lot of writing to do during the game, and a lot of it happens after the game. It's gonna be a late night, but it's gonna be a great time to just relax during the day, watch some football, be with family, eat, and then be home. Probably around kickoff. So of all the holiday kickoff times that they could have had, I think Thanksgiving night for me works great. So thank you, NFL.
You Eastern time zone ghouls. I can't truly say the same. I mean, it's most or a lot of the festivities have probably gone on at that point, but I mean, we're either still at dinner or just finishing dinner at 5:20 at that point. But I agree, if it is going to have to be a holiday, it's that one. Black Friday, the Black Friday game, I don't know who's playing on that one. I didn't look, but that would be a tough one, just for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I'm in agreement with you. It's a good day. You're hanging with family, you're doing a lot of different stuff, and if it's the evening, you're kind of winding things down, and then you get to concentrate a little further. But you're right, it always is. Everybody's always there and watching the Cowboys game, that middle game. Everyone is, they just timed that perfectly for the most eyeballs on that one. But hopefully all of you will still have a very fun Thanksgiving and cap it off, hopefully with a win by the Cincinnati Bengals against the Ravens on Thursday Night Football Thanksgiving. That is the schedule breakdown. This is the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Get that on your favorite audio streamer with all of the shows that we have. Check us out on YouTube, Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, Twitter accounts, all kinds of different stuff. Also keep it to cincyjungle.com, as well as A to Z Sports and the AFC North side of things with John Sheeran. Appreciate you, John. Thanks for hopping on and again dealing with my wacko schedule, kicking the time back. Same to all of you joining live. If you thought we were getting started a little earlier, apologize. It's my bad. It was StreamYard's bad during the show. I promise you, it was not my bad. But if you were expecting us going on a little earlier, that was my bad. Take care, everybody. We will be back, and we've got some other special guests coming on in the queue and reaching out to others, so stay tuned for that. We will see you soon. Thanks, John.
See you guys.